So, Iara Lee, welcome to a Liminal Space. It's a pleasure to have you here. You're the very first guest on this new video podcast. My understanding is you're in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I came as a transit visa and it became my permanent home.
Okay.
I was a jury member in a festival in Peloponneso in Greece, and I was just trying to do post-production in front of the computer. So I asked my assistant to send me to a warm place, and she says, "Here is Jeddah. You can just take a non-stop flight." I was like, "Oh, this is my dream to go to Saudi Arabia. It's such a red tape, impossible to enter country. So I wish, but I'm sure it's going to be impossible." And then she says, "Let me look." And then she's like, "Oh, they open online visa." I was like, "What?" I'll believe when I see it. Try to get one. And she got it. And then in 2 days, I was here, and I've been here ever since end of January
Wow.
because of Corona. And Corona curfew quarantine here is very strict. So we had even periods of 24-hour curfew. So the last 4 months, I've been going out. Maybe I went out 4 times just to go to the supermarket.
Wow. And what state of the curfew is it now? Are you still under curfew, or what's the situation
So
now?
finally, a few days ago, they lifted because I think capitalist talks louder. The cases are going up because they're testing everybody. But I think there's just too much pressure. But things are under control health-wise. I mean, despite the fact that the numbers go up. But I have Brazilian passport and US passport, and these are the two worst countries for Corona. So I'm like, I'm better off here.
Yeah, wow.
I mean, in
And
Brazil is 45,000 cases a day, new
yeah,
cases, and the Brazilian president also just was diagnosed positive.
yeah.
So it's really maddening.
So by way of introduction, I mean that's a perfect introduction. You are Brazilian. My understanding is of Korean heritage. You're Brazilian, and you are well, I would call you a documentary filmmaker and activist. Is that how you would describe yourself?
Yeah, an activist filmmaker because we got to use all the tools
Yeah,
to provoke a little bit of positive change. I mean, I know it's all humble, but we try through music, photography, dance, poetry, whatever it takes. And I think film is a very complete media because you have audio, you have visual, you have intellectual stimulation, emotional stimulation. So I've been going for that.
and did you enter this space from the activist space or from the filmmaking and art space?
Actually, I used to run an international film festival in Sao Paulo, Brazil in the 80s. So I come from the arts and culture world. I was always scouting for new talents and trying to bring new films to Brazil. And I was like, okay, what would it be to go behind the camera, after a few years running the festival? So I started making some short films. And they were also very pop culture and arts and culture. But with time, organically, you get to see that the world is collapsing and you have to use arts and culture to go beyond arts and culture. That's when I started to really focus on social justice and activists through filmmaking. And I think that's something that will stay with me until, I'm no longer physically in this world because it's my raison d'etre. That's what I do day and night.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've never had the opportunity to meet in person, but our films have been shown quite a bit together, including with Cinema du Desert, which is an Italian organisation who I hope to have on this podcast as well. And they do amazing work. They have a solar powered truck that they drive across Africa and various other places, showing films, documentaries, also children's films, a lot of films about migration, and they are able to bypass what I would say was a more mainstream, cinema industry, and be able to let regular people in villages and so forth, get to experience films. And I think that my understanding of your approach to filmmaking is very much in line with this, outside of the sort of the film industry. Would that be a fair comment?
Absolutely. They are very much our like long-term partners. And in fact, they were the ones who did the very first screening, outdoor screening, I mean, in a circus, just a couple of days ago, post-corona in Italy. So they launched the whole series of Cinema Mobile with our new film, Stuck in Chernobyl.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, so they just had a screening in Italy. And as you know, in Italy, Corona was terrifying too. So they're finally slowly going back to life. And I was very honored to be the first film that they started the series this summer.
Yeah, wonderful.
They screen in Burkina Faso, where we also do some partnerships with the farming, because they do a lot of farming, grassroots farming projects there as well. So we partner with them not only in filmmaking, but also grassroots
Yeah.
farming and tree growing and so forth.
So I wanted to, there's a name of one of your films that I wanted to mention the name, and then I would like you to maybe not just talk about that particular film, but perhaps just the sentence in context of all the work that you do. And the sentence is, when elephants fight, the grass suffers.
Yeah, it's an African proverb that applies to every war we have in this world. And many times people ask me, when you make a film about Syria, are you with Assad? Are you against Assad? And I'm like, I'm not with any politicians. I am with the people. Because at the end of the day, people are the ones who become the grass, when you
Yeah,
have all these proxy wars and all these countries fighting, and the people who have nothing to do with all these fights are the ones that get trampled. So I think it's a very wise African proverb that applies to every war and every conflict in this world. And I think what we citizens of the world have to do is to support the people who get displaced, killed, and they become internally displaced, they become refugees. And throughout my whole life, I've been making films about the Sahrawi people in Western Sahara who have been, occupied by Morocco for so many years. And there's a huge media blockade. Most people don't even know Western Sahara is a country.
yeah,
Most people have never heard Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara.
yeah,
So I try to bring, some of these big issues that are completely off the radar. And particularly like Western Sahara is the last colony in the African continent. And the Palestinian case is also another one, and Kashmir occupied by India, Pakistan, and even China. And yeah, like the last time I was in Solomon Islands making a film even about that talks about a little bit the occupation of Indonesia in West Papua, which is another place off the radar. So I'm trying to kind of bring global solidarity and get all these occupied countries to work together and learn about each other's conflicts and try to unite and join forces, and also to get citizens of the world. I think the Palestinian conflict is very well known, but not many people know about West Papua or, Western Sahara or Kashmir even. So we have so much information in the world, but we still don't know anything.
yeah.
So it's an uphill battle.
And is that where do you come from? Do you see yourself as providing information? Do you see yourself as providing entertainment? Do you see yourself as fighting politically? Where do you sort of see the films that you make? And are you trying to concretely do something? Or yeah, what's your approach?
Yes, I think first step is to educate people, but the second part is that to get action on the ground. A lot of times people watch and the films and they say, "Oh, I was so inspired. I learned so much," and I'm always like, "Okay, but what are we gonna do about learning so much?"
Yeah,
So to me, it's very important to be very action oriented, and to bring young people to do the action, because ultimately the world belongs to young people. And but we have to be humble as filmmakers. We know that we are planting seeds of love and solidarity. Sometimes maybe the fruits will be collected in the next generation when I'm not even around physically, but we have to keep on going. And parallel to the filmmaking, I also realized that it's very important to do action from our own side. So we started a foundation called Cultures of Resistance Foundation. So I try to not just document the people under occupation or conflict, but also work with them long-term wise. So we create scholarships, we support some of the NGOs, we support some of the activists featured in the film. We do lots of projects with them long term, you know, like if a musician in the film wants to do a new record, we try to bring some support. And we are now doing a film with Lesotho, this tiny little country in Southern Africa. So we created the Cultures of Resistance Award. So each of them will get a little cash award so they can push forward with the good things they are doing. This is a new film that will be launching this month called From Trash to Treasure, how to turn negatives into positives, which is also my motto, you know, everything that goes bad, we have to draw a lesson from it and use it for a positive outcome.
Yeah.
So I stay positive and hopeful. And
Well, this is so obvious, and I feel I need to ask you this question. Um, you've made many more films than I have. You've been doing this for longer than I have. But you seem to have this, even just in this conversation, and I mean, you were telling me you were up until 5:30 last night or this morning. I mean, and I know, I'm a good friend, I don't know if you know, of Jao, who I believe was editing one of your films in Portugal. And he's telling me about your work ethic and your positivity. And I want to know where do I go to the well to get some of this positivity, because I find that working on these really tough issues and struggles, and with people that are in, you know, different situations or degrees of suffering, or vulnerable people, it really personally takes a toll on me. And I'm currently in the middle of a small break in some way of filmmaking, and for various reasons, also Corona. It's one of the reasons that I'm starting to do this podcast, to get back in. So is there a way that you're able to, is this just something in your nature? Are you born with this positivity, or have you learnt to take care of that you need to take care of yourself in this space as well?
yeah, a lot of times, you know, even when I post about something outrageous, people like, anger and, you know, and I'm like, guys, to cry, to be angry is not going to solve anything. We have to channel all this outrage into positive action, you know? And I know it's very difficult because the tendency as humans is to just become very outraged and upset, and you know, sometimes we even freeze and don't know how to handle, you know, so we just give up, we just commit suicide, we just, you know, withdraw from this world. But I think hope is the only option. And I think we have to always find these little cracks on the wall about taking the positivity and the hope. I think maybe it's just something that you, as a mindset, you know, that you have to really use that strategy to keep on going, because at the end of the day, is the game of resilience, is the game of perseverance. And who is more perseverant is the one that will win the war, you know? So I always tell people, don't just be negative. Use that. Like, you know, I was in this Gaza flotilla and the Israeli commandos came and they killed 9 people in the middle of international waters, all our colleagues. And people ask me, weren't you like super scared? You know, they come and they start shooting. I was like, no, I was outraged. I was not scared, you know, and that just fueled me to become even more, you know, concerned and action oriented. And to me, all these things that come against me actually push me to become even more focused on the causes.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good strategy of survival, and it's a good strategy to also to keep your equanimity, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to knock you down, and you have to just find that equanimity position that nothing will bring you down. And when they bring you down, you just resurrected from the ashes, which is what I do all the time, you know. I mean, I had so many life-threatening experiences, and I'm always resurrected from the ashes.
Yeah. And how do you feel in in those experiences of, in the end, you are there, or let me ask you, I would say that you are there to document something. I mean, that's why you're there. And in these times of risky encounters, and on the Gaza Freedom Flotilla was very dangerous, and not dangerous in a academic way. I mean, people were killed. It's a very real risk. And a lot of people don't fully appreciate what you do and the places that you put yourselves in, that you put you and your team in. And at the end of the day, would it be right to say, unless you actually bring footage or bring evidence or bring documentation out from that scenario, you're just putting people potentially at risk for no reason? So how do you go about that? I mean, how do you get footage out of very risky places, or how were you able to? I know you were, but how did you get this footage out, for example, in this Gaza Freedom Flotilla?
Yeah, I mean, we have to use strategies each time, like when I was in the occupied territories of Western Sahara, we were doing all these interviews, and the word was starting to get out that a filmmaker, activist was able to enter the occupied territories. So we just had to, accelerate everything, get the footage, and go. I took the bus. In that particular case, I took the bus early in the morning where everybody's asleep, so they couldn't find me in the bus. And I didn't take the plane because they would basically just deport me right away. And when I was in Nigeria, documenting the people in the Niger Delta with their Kalashnikovs and everything, I was actually more scared of the government because they would be the ones who would also confiscate my footage. I was not scared of dealing with the, people who had the Kalashnikovs and the blowing up the, oil stations, demanding more justice for this area. And with the Gaza, it was the same. I told my cameraman, they're gonna confiscate everything. Don't use the big HD card. Use the small SD card, And in the convolution of things, I thought he would forget, but he actually did remember, and he was able to kind of hid, behind the elastic of the underwear. And since he was Serbian and blonde, blue eyes, the Israelis were more occupied with the Muslims, So we were able to get the only footage out. But you're right that the risks are so much, and at some point I say, hey, I don't mind putting my life in risk, but I really don't like the idea that I have a cameraman, a sound man, a production coordinator sometimes with me. And so this is the only thing. So now I'm happy that we have a small camera. Sometimes I can make a film by myself.
Yeah.
Because, as far as me, I already took this decision. I don't have a family. I don't have biological children waiting for me at home and finding out the mom is in jail again, So I make some very personal decisions how I can live this life without causing too much suffering around me. But, crew members are also like family members. And sometimes they come and they do filmmaking with me thinking they're going on an adventure. And then I try to tell them, this is not adventure, this is war, And they just realize when things are happening on the ground. So it's been a very difficult, challenging situation. And also to me, it's very important not to harm the people that are featured in the film. So sometimes I have to blur their faces. Sometimes I have to take them out of the film because I'm very respectful, It's not about just me being this amazing filmmaker that brings all this incredible, impossible footage. If this is gonna hurt them, I prefer to take it out, even if the film will suffer.
Yeah.
So it's a constant thing. And I think for we filmmakers, we have to be very responsible and very respectful and really understand each case and make decisions, but still try to bring the strong content without harming people.
Yeah.
That's very important.
There are two main things that brought to my mind from that. The first is I've made a film in Morocco looking at migration, and in the end I had a Moroccan. He's my dear friend now, but as all everyone you end up working with becomes dear friends in this space, because you spend days, weeks, months, sometimes years in very not just dangerous but very emotional environments, and we got arrested by the Moroccan military and police. And what I worked out was that in the end it was actually me that provided more safety to my Moroccan friend by the Moroccan authorities, because I have two passports. I'm Australian with Italian heritage. And I believe that they didn't treat him as badly as they would have because I was there. So in some way we have this, well, we're very privileged because of our documents sometimes. And
Well, that was not the case. I have this American passport. When we were in jail in Israel, the American embassy came with a list of lawyers and basically said, sign everything Israel asks you to sign. Otherwise, here's the list of lawyer, $500 an hour, and good luck.
right.
So that didn't have to have a strong American passport. But luckily, I had a Brazilian passport, and it was during the left-wing government of Lula. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was very kind and sent someone and looked after me afterwards, and that was very helpful.
Right.
But I wouldn't think that the Bolsonaro government, if I was in trouble in Israel, the Bolsonaro government would do anything on my behalf.
Yeah.
So it really depends. My cameraman was from Spain when we went to the occupied territory of Western Sahara, and he was very scared because it was official that the Spanish government would not give any support to people who are meddling in this conflict, with the Western Sahara. So it's this diplomatic thing is something that it really depends on the circumstances at hand.
Yeah, amazing. And you always work with, how do you work with local people? Do you have your team of cameramen and sound people, or do you hire people wherever you go, or how does that work across your films?
Yeah, I try to always involve local crew members. When I was in Pakistan making a film about the porters of K2 Mountain, I was the only foreigner. My cameraman, my soundman, my production coordinator, my editor, everybody was Pakistani.
Yeah.
And I feel very proud because, then you can make a film that is very genuine and not just a foreigner coming trying to make a film about them. So this is very important to me. Yeah.
And that was actually exactly the second part of the question. How do you feel as an outsider going to Pakistan, or what are the challenges or the advantages that you see, that you have as this outsider, or perhaps do you feel an outsider? Do you feel that you're an outsider?
Yeah, I blend right in. I spent some months in Pakistan. Everybody feels I'm just like a Pakistani without speaking the Urdu. I'm here now in Saudi Arabia, and I'm just like a sister to everybody here. Everybody feels comfortable. So I think this is the greatest thing, my ability to just merge with the culture and just take a humble approach of learning and being curious. I'm never coming to dictate things or with a script. So I think the fact that I come with the curiosity to learn also makes them more open, because I'm not like this obnoxious foreigner that thinks knows better.
Yeah.
I think this approach is very important, and just kind of let them tell the story, instead of me imposing a script, and this is the amazing thing about documentary filmmaking. You don't know where the film is going to take you, because people will take you to different corners that you had no idea you would be there.
Do you have some idea of a story before you go, or are you arriving with really an open, open mind, open heart, open ears to discover the best way to tell any story?
Yeah, no, I even call myself like a parachute filmmaker. I just land abruptly. Sometimes with as little knowledge as most people. Like when I went to Burkina Faso, I was going to make a film about the farmers, and I didn't know about this incredible history that they were just coming from, using popular insurrection to get rid of a president that was glued to power for so many years, and all the intricacies of their activism and anti-colonialism, and so it's like a learning process that a lot of times you learn on the ground. And so I'm very much a parachute filmmaker, but I have the ability of also making contact with people very quickly. So in Burkina Faso case, people are like, "You've been here for 1 week. How come you know the whole arts and culture community?" I was like, "Well, because I met you and you introduced me to five more, and these five more introduced me to 10 more, and
Yeah.
now I know the whole activist world here."
Yeah. I think it's totally refreshing both to talk to you and to hear your approach, because it's the opposite in many ways to what you may learn in a more traditional either filmmaking school or even in a filmmaking industry and television and broadcast and even festivals sometimes when it comes to funding. Because one of the craziest things that any documentary filmmaker has to face if they're trying to get funding is that they're asked, what is the film about? And you have to write a film and you have to provide almost a script of a film. And it's the parachute filmmaker does not fit at all in this model. So is that you are independent? Cultures of Resistance is an independent organization and filmmaking group. Is that why you work in this independent space, to be less bound by constraints and to be able to move quickly? Or why have you chosen to work in the way that you have?
Yeah, you're actually so right. If you are going for funding, you have to write a script and, and all that. And I'm sure a lot of people, filmmakers, they write a script, and when they go to those places, they end up having to do something totally different, because life evolves in unpredictable ways. But it is true that the starting point is having a script to convince the broadcasters. In my case, I am also very, very unusual in that particular situation because 30 years ago, I started SRI investment, socially responsible investing. And with that, people were like making fun of me. Oh, how can you make films? How can you make money investing in positive things? If you want to make money, you have to invest in stock market for weapons and pharmaceuticals and tobacco and, alcohol and things that will bring you a lot of money, but not necessarily, positive for society. And I was like, no, we can invest in renewable energy. We can invest in cutting edge technologies that have, idealistic things in mind, and we can do a lot of things. And so, I started 30 years ago, and then it paid off, 30 years later, because, I was able to have this kind of like foresee what were the needs of the world and kind of take a more cutting edge approach to stocks and bonds. And so
Wow.
I don't need to submit my script to broadcast. I make my very low budget films, and I make it independently. And when I was in Solomon Islands, I was talking to some journalists, and they were like, "Yeah, these people, they want to do a climate change story, and the editor sends this journalist here for 3 days to cover this whole Melanesia, Polynesia, Micronesia." So they have to be very much narrow-minded and just like regurgitate what they already know. There's no time for learning anything new. And in my case, it's the opposite. Sometimes if I need to take a whole year on the ground to understand and then make a film, I'll do it. Sometimes I actually don't need, I just do it in like a month, something that most filmmakers would take a year.
Yeah.
So, but I have this ability to monitor the progress and what kind of time is needed to get the story and the filmmaking done. And this is definitely something that is very unusual and special about the way I go about filmmaking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's special, it's unique, it's 100% inspiring. Yeah, myself. I've always self-funded my films, and I did my last film was done through crowdfunding. So I come from in some way the same spirit. The idea of waiting or writing and then waiting and I mean in some of these stories it's almost like some stories need to be told now. Documentary is documenting, a moment in time, something that's occurring now. This whole concept that you have to wait many, many months and keep revising your script and getting bits and pieces of money. I mean, it's a traditional way of filmmaking, but I actually believe that we're still trapped in this old thinking of how things were done. And they were done that way because they had to be done that way. You had to have a huge camera and sound guy or woman, and then you had to go to the studio and you had to pay so much per hour for the editing suite and, you know, the things, all of that process now can be literally done on a tiny camera and a laptop, because that's how
Yeah.
I do my work. So I know that it can be done in that way. But I don't think enough people are either aware of it or just they're still stuck in this old way of thinking. But then there's a big challenge if you are getting your funding through a broadcaster. You know that at the end of the day, your film will have an audience. It will be broadcast. So how do you go about this challenge that every one of us has, which is how do you get people to get their eyes to watch your films?
Yeah, that's always the biggest challenge because you can produce films, but how you get the audience. So we also created this great, like, cumbersome grassroots movement to get our films watched. You know, like we have someone in our, organization that literally one by one tells people in our Facebook, realm and Instagram to watch the film. Here's the link. Now we decided to become self-distributor, and we put our films online on YouTube and just kind of notify everybody. And we do a lot of screenings in the basement, in the classroom, outdoors, film festival. Whatever it takes, and the numbers are cumulative. You
Yeah,
get 40 people, you get 10 people, you get 500. And if you look at the list of screenings, we basically show each of our films in 100 countries every year. Now with Corona, we had to go indoors and just do everything online. But in fact, again, we are trying to turn negative into positive. When we decided to go self-distribution through YouTube, we had like 35,000 people watch the Stuck in Chernobyl on the launch. And I was like, oh, I will never get that in physical screenings. So at the end, it was like, wow, so actually this is a good way, to get people to watch our little films because they're so grassroots. They don't have sales agent, they don't have distributors. And it's so difficult to get people to take the bicycle or take the train or take the subway to go watch our films in a physical space at a particular time. So at the end, this crazy online launch makes a lot of sense, and we are now going to launch all our films on YouTube and just make every campaign online and get people to see from the comfort of their home at convenience of their time.
yeah,
So we were very happy. 35,000 people watched Stock in Chernobyl launch, and K2, for example, this film I made in Pakistan, we had on YouTube, and for a few years we had accumulated maybe 4,000 people views. All of a sudden, something triggered inside that it went to 100,000, just because a mountaineer or another film would piggyback somehow, or somewhere it
a,
went
cra-
viral
a
somehow.
crazy YouTube algorithm that we have no idea exactly how it operates. Yeah, I haven't
It jumped
experienced.
from 4,000 to 100,000.
Yeah,
It was amazing.
yeah, and what about? I know I follow your journey online on social media, and you, I don't know, do you consider yourself, do you have a home, or are you a nomad in both spirit and also in practice? And I know you travel as much as possible for film screenings as well as making your films. So yeah, is there something, well, I believe there's something really special about attending as many film screenings as possible, obviously because of the discussion, and people can understand that it wasn't, this film just wasn't magically made. Here is the human that had to blood, sweat, and tears, to produce this. And I know that that's something very dear to me. So how do you manage this space of trying to attend screenings yourself?
Yeah, you need a lot of physical and mental stamina,
Mhm.
because people from outside are always like, oh, I mean, you should have your life traveling around, but it takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
But I've done this, all my life since I'm 19 years old. I've been on the road. I cover most of the world and I want to see all over again. But with Corona, I also kind of like paradigm shift. I proved that I can be sedentary because in 4 months I haven't left my room.
That's
So
yeah.
I,
And would you say that is that the first time, for example, since you were 19 that you've spent wow. And could you imagine that you could have successfully done this? Or if someone had have told you 6 months ago that you'd have to stay in your room for 4 months, what would you have told them?
yeah, and that's the thing. Life is about adapting, and I think this is also survival thing and how you can find happiness in the most odd circumstances. And in the other circumstances, you have to find ways. Like now, I find happiness having a cup of coffee that I can make at home.
Hmm.
How I can take, a little bit more sleep, despite the fact not a lot of sleep. But you have to adapt, and this is the game. And if I can move around, I'll move around. If I can't, I'm just so grateful that I'm able to self quarantine. Because most people, in crowded countries like India, Bangladesh, they don't even have the ability to self isolate and not be, susceptible to the contagion. And the fact that I have my basic needs, which is food, running water, electricity, is already amazing. I'm so grateful.
Mm.
So life is about extremes. Sometimes you're moving, sometimes you're standing still.
And what's your next extreme? Do you have are you able to leave Saudi Arabia now, or do you have a project, or are you going home, or you still unsure of your move from here?
Well, Corona was a paradigm shift, epiphany too, because I realized the most important thing that we humans have to do is to lower our carbon footprint. And making so many films and traveling so much is a very heavy carbon footprint. So I would like to take the approach and that I also advise to everybody to do less, to consume less, to produce less, to go slower, which is something very hard to impose on myself because I'm always like fast moving, doing a lot. But Mother Earth is heavy, and Mother Earth just wants us to slow down and let the animals roam free. Let's cage the humans so the animals can roam free. So I'm willing to take that sacrifice and not just be go, 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 go. Just kind of do all the efforts to kind of like be lighter, like light footprint. I'm thinking actually of, down the road, which actually has been a dream for a few years already, to become a farmer and maybe create a community space where young people can come and learn about getting their hands in the earth because we are too distant from our basic needs, which is like good food without pesticides, agrotoxics. We don't know anything about forestry, biodiversity. We don't know anything about how to grow carrots, tomatoes. We know about all the fancy brands and logos around the world, but we don't know about, how to get things to come from Earth to feed us. And farmers are the most important people in our lives. They're the ones that sustain us. So I was thinking that now that I'm like becoming a senior person, let the young people travel and just
Well,
I'm just gonna like maybe be very settled down with you know grow some trees that will take 10, 20 years to grow.
yeah,
Plant some trees and let them grow
it
and
sounds
bring us, yeah.
it sounds amazing. I mean, I see something very interesting in what you're saying because um, in my own life, in my filmmaking, my original films were about environmental issues, and then I made a film about electronics, and I was trying to make social commentary on the way the world is going and disconnection, but in the process, I found myself totally disconnected through
Yeah.
my filmmaking. So I wanted my filmmaking to show others, to use the filmmaking as an example. And now I feel I'm permanently attached to a computer and to technology. And so it's a very strange paradox, perhaps, or just strange situation. And so hearing you say that doesn't surprise me at all, knowing your work ethic. And, I imagine a lot of what you do is also very reliant on technology, both the film.
Too much.
Yeah, yeah.
I keep saying, how can we have offline life?
But it's difficult because you've also told me that YouTube and online is the way of getting films to audiences. So it's a very it's a challenging space. I think, honestly, I think that it's, from a filmmaking perspective, and online and audience and independent and distribution, I think there's just a big question mark at the moment. No one's really sure if cinema, as in the building with seats, and is going to, keep going. Are we Netflix? Is it YouTube? Is it independent screenings? Is it television? Very interesting. But I must say, I felt myself get about 10% calmer when I heard that you want to get into farming and more in touch with the land. And I'm hoping this podcast can touch all of these issues. And I'm totally on it. Like, this was even more inspiring and amazing than I could have imagined. And I thank you. I know you're so busy. I wonder if, would you mind if I just ask you one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's just, what would you? I mean, it's the cliche question, but I think it's really, really important to ask, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you tell, anyone that's watching this, or people that are thinking about like entering this space, either of documentary or activism, because they don't have to go hand in hand a lot. You are just so amazing to be able to be so full of energy to do this. But what would you tell people? A lot of people think that filmmaking is easy and glamorous and awards and red carpet, and people think activism is standing in a street with a sign and just yelling at. But what this reality really means. You've been right at the coalface, and you've put your body in harm's way when the vast majority of people have never even contemplated doing that. So is there anything that you would like to share on that?
Well, I think young people have to get a reality, lesson, because as you said, a lot of times people from outside like, oh, this is so cool, this is so incredible, but it's so hard work and so tedious a lot of times, because it's about diligence, it's about being very, very committed. And there's a lot of bureaucratic work, there's a lot of legal work from when we make documentaries with, so many people involved. There's a lot of outreach work going and trying to find the audience. There's a lot of database to get everything coordinated. There's so much like tedious work that people don't realize. And I think this is very important, because people do think, filmmaking and activism is just very bombastic and fun. And it's, it's almost like being in the laboratory with a cell and observing a cell for like 10 years. This is as tedious as it can get, because post-production, you're surgery to get all the footage to make sense, and then you have to cut the music and the sound cleaning and the mix and the subtitles. I mean, I get involved in everything. Sometimes I'm like cleaning subtitles, like proofreading.
Yeah.
And also I think people have to understand. People sometimes send me messages saying, I want to be hired to be a filmmaker and activist and travel the world. I'm like, hey, nobody hires me. I have to make money somewhere else. This is also another thing. We have to be realistic. It is about having a way of making all these amazing things happen. You have to make money. So sometimes they say, well, maybe you should have like a day job, and then you don't need to compromise your arts and culture and your activists, because then it can be more pure, because the source of the money will come from your commercial work. And then you can do your activist work without any kind of like censorship or concession to be more commercial. So I think these are so many things that people have to understand. And I think the resilience and the diligence and the strength, you always come back from the ashes, because a lot of times, you'll find yourself like completely wiped out, or you have to just
Yeah.
and not lose the enthusiasm, but always understand that it's a balance game, and it's about everything. So it's not just about one thing. So there is 1% of fun, but there is 99% of hard work.
Yeah, hard work, and also I don't think I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate the toll that it can take on yourself physically, emotionally, and
Yeah, this is another thing. People have nice families, nice homes, and they're like, oh, I wish I could be traveling. I was like, you have to make a decision. You cannot have a nice home and a nice family if you're going to be, confronting state terrorist governments under bombs and cluster bombs. But people want to have it all. And life is about
yeah.
give and take. So people have to make hard decisions in life, and stick to that
And
you
have you
know
found ways in your own life and practice to balance your mental health and to maintain? I mean, I if that's an intrusive question, I'm struggling at the moment with myself in this corona and so much, and I'm realizing that in many ways this is like um, the hidden killer as well in many issues, not just in corona, but also this one thing that hardly anybody considers or speaks about is, as a filmmaker, rejection. Rejection is enormous in as far as distribution, trying to get your films screened at festivals continually. We use social media to present all the successes of our work, but hardly ever is the real struggle, the real toll, and the real rejection told. And for me,
yeah,
that's a very real part of what we're doing as well.
absolutely, absolutely. When I switched from pop culture to arts and culture for activists, I got a lot of rejection. And I was like, oh my God, they don't like me anymore. Maybe I'm a bad filmmaker. But then I realized you can't please all. You have to find your niche. Especially when I make films about so many obscure issues. How can I get mainstream
Yeah,
audience? It's impossible.
exactly.
And and rejection is part of daily life. So what I try to do is to really open the realm of attempts. So like even film festivals, yeah, we go to 100 countries and hundreds of festivals because we tried thousands of them.
Yeah,
So each invitation is accompanied by 50 rejections. And this is what we have to get used to it. Don't think you're a bad filmmaker. Don't think people don't appreciate you, but you have to find your audience and you find your niche. And it's amazing nowadays. There is audience for everything. Like if you're a lover of habanero pepper, you'll find a community that is a lover of habanero pepper.
that's
There is audience for everything.
yeah. And I think there's a second, not necessarily rejection, but this idea of we make film about an issue because we're passionate about it. It's the only it's the only logical explanation as to why we would leave our friends and our family and our place, and we would go with a tiny camera and would sleep on floors and we sleep in buses and we do what we do. It must be because we're passionate about it. It must be because we believe in it. And deep down, it must be because we would love change to happen as a result of our work. And the truth is that very often any visible or concrete change either doesn't happen or doesn't happen immediately, and that's another form of rejection. Not rejection so much, but another truth that is hitting any filmmaker that I talk to in this space. And I,
Yeah.
yeah, how are you? Would you like to talk to that?
Yeah, but instead of being frustrated, just be humble. one person sent feedback, positive feedback. You touched one heart.
Mhm.
And I think in a way we are also underestimating our impact because what we do is very intangible. Maybe somewhere, far away, we are touching people's hearts and minds, and we are provoking change that is going to be very gradual. As we started this interview, I just mentioned that sometimes you plant the seed of love and solidarity, and the fruits will be collected generations down the road. So it doesn't happen overnight, but if you go humble approach and you just keep on going, you know, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah. Oh, that's a wonderful way to, yeah. Thank you again. I'm really. Oh, sorry. Before we finish, is there any? Is there a way that people can discover more about your work and watch your films and so forth online?
Yes, we are the cultures of resistance, people. Cultures in the plural because it's about everything, how we can use arts and culture for activism.
Okay.
So
So Google
whoever wants to come to our
search
YouTube
cultures. Yeah.
channel and website and foundation, we are there.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and even more so that this is the very first episode. And I love the motivation and the positivity that you've brought to it. So I say shukran and thank you. And yeah, good luck with your next little venture or adventure. Thanks for taking the time.
Ilalika,
Okay.
masalama,
Maslama.
shukran too.